The U.S. military announced Tuesday it's dropped all charges against 5 men held at Guantanamo, but added it had no plans to release them. The news came just weeks after the resignation of Lieutenant Colonel Darrell Van de Velde. He was the prosecutor in all 5 cases. He'd accused the military of deliberately withholding evidence that could have helped clear them. One of the 5 men is the Ethiopian-born Binyam Mohammed. His lawyer, Clive Stafford Smith, said, quote, "Far from being a victory for Mohammed in his long-running struggle for justice, this is more of the same farce that's Guantanamo." He said the military has already said it plans to file new charges against Mohammed within a month. Meanwhile, the White House has confirmed reports President Bush has no plans to close the prison at Guantanamo before leaving office. Defense Secretary Robert Gates said Tuesday it was an issue for the next administration and Congress to take up. We're joined now by Michael Ratner, president of the New York-based Center for Constitutional Rights. He's been closely following developments in Guantanamo. He joins me here in the Firehouse studio. Welcome to Democracy Now!
Thank you, Amy.
Let's start with these 5 prisoners, who they are. Charges dropped, but they remain in prison.
Well, they were people tried by the military commissions, and I think people want to be aware there's sort of 2 things going on. There's the military commissions, and there's the habeas corpus. Military commissions are what try people. The habeas corpus proceedings are what test the detention even without trial. And I actually think that while there's lots going on within the administration, lots of suppression, that what's going on is they're trying to put out all of these fires that people have caused them that try and give people rights, both with habeas as well as rights in the courts. These 5, of course, were before a military commission. They were 2 weeks away from a hearing. Typically of the Bush administration, they go and right before a hearing, they try and change everything because they cannot sustain a court hearing in any of their cases, really. And as you'll see, that's a pattern they followed. Of course, the fact that one of half a dozen prosecutors resigned in this case, claiming that they weren't given all the evidence they should have been, the defendants, is obviously very significant here as well. So within the military commissions, you have those 5. You also have, of course, the administration now saying with Hamdan, the so-called bin Laden driver, that they are now going to ask for a higher sentence for Hamdan. He was given 5 years and 5 months. He's 6 months. He's supposed to be out December 31st. They're going to ask to keep him in. Underlying that, of course, and I think it's being destroyed right now, is the administration's belief that the executive can do whatever he wants in the so-called war on terror, hold people forever and try them in kangaroo courts. So the military commission system, the kangaroo courts, is really coming apart. But I should also say the habeas system is also coming apart, which is to say it demonstrates that we won after 3 Supreme Court victories, finally, the right to go into a court and challenge detentions. And what happened just in the last couple of days was in the Boumediene case, which is the lead case in the Supreme Court, 6 people charged with allegedly a conspiracy to bomb an embassy in Sarajevo. The administration is no longer depending on those charges which have been depending for years. And again, that's right before the hearing of the habeas case in the district court. So you're seeing really the administration policy, I think, coming apart in the kangaroo courts, coming apart in trying to hold people.
What about the resignation of Lieutenant Colonel Darrell Van de Velde?
Well, you know, this is one of a half a dozen prosecutors. You're not even talking about just the courts going after this administration, as sort of hard as it has been to get them to move. There's been 5 or 6 prosecutors who've resigned because the entire system is one in which the president decides, or the Pentagon, what they like and what they don't like. And if someone is pushed to do a prosecution or someone is pushed to withhold evidence, military prosecutors who are trained in the law are not going to accept it, and they resign. His resignation was a big one, because he basically said, we are not giving people what we lawyers call exculpatory evidence that might show their non-guilt.
What about President Bush, it being reported by the New York Times saying he privately decided not to close Guantanamo, Robert Gates saying it's going to be up to the next administration?
Well, it's certainly going to be up to the next administration. That's a given, you know, but what President Bush has been saying for a long time that he would close Guantanamo. Both presidential candidates have said they would close Guantanamo. And I remember promises when I litigated the Haitian cases at Guantanamo of President Clinton saying he would close Guantanamo. That didn't happen. And the question in this next administration, will it really happen? Will they really close? Will either of the candidates really close Guantanamo?
Do you have any indication, for example, that Obama would or that McCain would?
Well, they've said they would close it. And, of course, there was an interesting reaction to the recent Supreme Court decision, the Boumediene decision, which gave habeas rights to people at Guantanamo. And McCain called it one of the worst decisions in American history. Obama celebrated the decision as an important decision. And that's the same case that I've just described, in which now the administration has withdrawn its charges about Sarajevo. So that's an indication that at least one candidate may feel more strongly about fundamental constitutional rights than the other. But until they take office and until they act, it's too difficult to say. I can only say that we're going to have to keep pushing on all of these issues no matter who takes office.
And the significance of the recent referendum that was passed overwhelmingly by members of the American Psychological Association over the objections of the leadership there, a movement that's been going on for a while, approving a landmark measure banning members, psychologists, from taking part in interrogations at Guantanamo. And now this historic election for the APA, where the leading dissident psychologist, Steve Reisner, a New York psychoanalyst, is, as we speak, being voted on. The vote is being taken place for the next president of the American Psychological Association. They're voting by email.
Well, I give Democracy Now! Tremendous credit for this whole change in the American Psychological Association. You went after these people really early and got them into very embarrassing positions about their cooperation in interrogations at Guantanamo and probably in other places around the world. The fact that it took them 7 years to get there is pretty outrageous to me. The fact that they have psychologists drawing up interrogation plans for people, finding their weaknesses, finding the ways they exploit people, is a 1984 all the way. And so it's about time they passed that resolution. But I just want to credit Deanne again for that.
Well, Michael Ratner, thank you very much for joining us, president of the Center for Constitutional Rights. And this final note. On Election Day, Democracy Now! Will be doing a special 5-hour live broadcast from 7 p.m. to midnight Eastern Time to bring you the election results around the country and reaction from around the world. The program will include live coverage of results as the polls close, on-the-ground reports from across the country or across the globe, running in-depth analysis and commentary from a wide range of guests you won't get anywhere else. That's November 4th from 7 to midnight Eastern Standard Time. Then the morning after, November 5th, Democracy Now! Expands to a 2-hour broadcast from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern to provide complete coverage of the election outcome. So contact your local radio and television station for their local listings. We'll also be live streaming the video and audio of the broadcast on our homepage, of course, at democracynow.org. And that does it for our show. Democracy Now! Produced by Mike Burke, Shufo Dokudu, Sarah Mate, Angeli Comet, Steve Martinez, Nicole Salazar, Honey Massoud, Robbie Karen, Mike DeFilippo, Miguel Noguera, Peter Curries are our engineers. Thanks also to Becca Staley, Hugh Grant, Samantha Chamblay, Jessel Noor, John Randolph, Jose Miranda, Travis Collins, Vesta Godars. Our website is democracynow.org. There you can go to watch the video, the flash, the podcast, the audio podcast. You can read all of our transcripts and you can send them to your friends here in this country and around the world. Support independent media. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks so much for joining us.